test the assumption that Trump really is the favorite of large numbers of Americans. Here in New Hampshire, we've got 1.3 million people. Donald Trump in the primary in February earned about 100,000 votes. Yeah, that's a lot of people, but that is a tiny fraction, less than 10% of the population of New Hampshire. And when you go across the country, even though he was the winner in the Republican primaries, we know that primaries have very low turnout. That goes to another issue we were just talking about. And Donald Trump received typically single-digit support as a fraction of the actual population in these states. So are there some people who are really mad as hell? Some people who want to blame immigrants and refugees, or blame Mexico, or blame foreign trade deals, or all the rest? Sure. And like I said a couple minutes ago, there are underlying inequalities in our society that are making life hard for people. That partly drives Trump's success. And I don't want to dismiss those whatsoever. But the idea that Trump really is the favorite of a large segment of the society, that just doesn't hold water. You look at the votes, he hasn't gotten that many. His unfavorable rating is up about 70% last I saw. So I think we as a country are better than that. Sure, we like political theater, we like being entertained. He's great for the TV stations, and they cover the heck out of him because he boosts their ratings. I hope that we as Americans might start to decide that, as entertaining as he may be, he doesn't deserve that much of our attention, and maybe the TV stations will catch on and start talking a little more about issues and start holding him a little more accountable. But I do think that we will make the right choice this fall, that Donald Trump is simply not fit to be the commander-in-chief, that as much as he looks the part of a brave, truth-telling politician, when it comes down to it, he's just taking the easy way out. He's saying he isn't giving any real prescriptions for how to fix our problems. He's throwing out a whole lot of lies. In fact, if you check the fact checkers, about 3/4 of the statements they've checked of his are false. I mean, that alone,
3/4.
That alone should disqualify someone from office. And the last point I want to make, in terms of this race right here, District 5 for Executive Council, I don't know, again, what is in the heart of hearts of David Wheeler, who I'm challenging, but I don't think it was right of him to be there when Trump recently gave his speech in New Hampshire applauding, and to not express any concern about the lies, about the fear-mongering that Trump has been practicing throughout this campaign. So I have called on him. I wrote a respectful letter to him, and I will continue to engage him respectfully, Mr. Wheeler. But I think that we need to hear from him. He was the highest elected state official to attend the Trump event. We need to hear from him that it isn't okay for somebody to be lying and fear-mongering in the way that Trump was.
Trump often touts Republican talking points. When the tragic catastrophe in Orlando happened, Donald Trump tried to say that his racist views on Muslims were vindicated and that his Muslim ban was still a good idea. I was wondering what you think of Orlando mass shootings and gun control.
It's a heartbreaker. What can you say? 49 innocent lives, people attending a gay club.
100 people
down.
injured.
And right. I mean, this is...
And often, I don't mean to cut you off, but yesterday I was listening to Terry Gross on NPR, and she had some survivors from Columbine and from Virginia Tech on. And the survivor from Columbine was shot twice, and she has been paralyzed for life since the 90s in a wheelchair. And so often we have the numbers and say, well, luckily 50 people survived with injuries and 50 people died. But so often the survivors of such a horrendous attack suffer from physical and mental injuries for decades, the rest of their lives.
Yeah. I mean, the human cost of a tragedy like Orlando is staggering. Add to that the little discussed fact that Orlando was just one in a continuing spate of mass shootings. The statistic I saw was that in the last year, over 500 people have died in mass shooting events where 4 or more people were killed. And then you look at the total statistics on gun violence, some 11,000 people killed in gun homicides each year in the US, and another 20,000 killed through gun suicides who took their own lives. That's over 30,000 people a year dying from gun violence. The idea that this isn't a public health emergency boggles the mind. The idea that Congress has barred the Institutes of Health from studying this, from doing the research to know what kind of response
From
is
one
necessary.
lobbying group, excuse me, sir, but one lobbying group, the NRA, has and one man, particularly Wayne LaPierre, who's run the NRA into this incredibly powerful force of hate, in destruction and death. They want to say that it's the Second Amendment. I know I'm the interviewer, I'm trying to stay partial, but I'm also a very opinionated Bill O'Reilly leftist man. And I have to say that the NRA they're more than anyone in the country. Wayne LaPierre's hands are drenched in the blood of American citizens.
I want my granddad's NRA. I grew up on a small farm. The family's been farming for generations. There were guns around. You'd go hunting. My brother and I got a BB gun when we were young, and we enjoyed shooting things around the yard. And the magazines we used to get from the NRA were, filled with hunting tips, safety, good care of your guns, all that sort of thing. And of course, that's most of what the NRA does. They run gun training programs, safety programs. They teach young kids how to handle guns safely. And that's great. That's what they should be doing. I respectfully do not believe that they should be exerting the kind of political power they have to the extent that they shut down discussion of any of the common sense reforms that could reduce these number of needless deaths. I don't have the complete package, and again, the Executive Council is not the place that makes our policy on guns, but I do believe that we should be able to proceed with a common sense approach, not taking away people's guns. That they're a part of our culture. They're something that I've enjoyed doing over the years, like so many other Americans. But the idea that we can go to the extreme that we are today without any restrictions at all, hardly, without common sense measures to contain folks who are suspected terrorists from buying guns designed for war zones and using them on American streets, that's crazy. And we've certainly got to do something about it.
And I'm glad you said guns designed by for war zones. So often the AR-15 is said that it's just a rifle, but the creator of the AR-15 recently came out to NBC News with documents that stated that he created the AR-15 to be a competition for the AK-47.
Designed for war.
But also, there are guns that people aren't even considering for gun control. I mean, so often we hear about the AR-15, and we have seen the destruction that is caused across the country. But there are handguns that fire just as fast, and perhaps with more accuracy, that they're not on the table even. But it's more and more it feels like not even anything is on the table. Nothing has been done. And children died on Christmas.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth remembering. The last statistic I saw, around 70 million Americans own guns. 99.999, I don't know how many nines of those Americans are law-abiding citizens, who, like my own family, enjoy hunting or sport. The idea, however, that we are also creating these crazy loopholes, which allow people the tiny, tiny fraction of people who intend to use these guns to harm other people or themselves, people with mental illness, to also get guns through the gun show loophole by buying online. That's just not good policy. And I doubt that the vast majority of card-carrying NRA members support those policies. I think the vast majority of Americans agree that people with serious mental illness, people suspected of terrorism, should not be buying guns, and they certainly shouldn't be doing so without robust background checks.
I agree. I just want to tear apart Republican talking point on guns is drugs are illegal, and yet drugs are prevalent in our society, and if we outlawed or have stricter gun control, the criminals would be the only people with the guns, and people would sell guns on the black market more. Do you find validity with that talking point? Because I don't.
I'm not an expert on the gun issue, and I'm not going to pretend to be, but the idea that we're going to take away America's guns is crazy. And I don't know any politician, left or right, that is proposing it. Donald Trump may say that of Hillary Clinton. It's bogus. She has never proposed that, and I doubt she ever will. Again, because the vast majority of gun owners are law-abiding citizens exercising their Second Amendment rights. So I just don't think that argument has any basis in fact.
Back to the presidential election, and back to the presidential election, and a specific issue I want to touch on: climate change. The Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate have extremely different views on climate change. Donald Trump is a known climate change denier and has stated that it's a hoax from the Chinese, and multiple times, and continues to say that it's a hoax from the Chinese. And Hillary Clinton has plans to combat climate change. What can be done in New Hampshire to fight climate change? And what would you advise the governor to do about climate change?
That's such an important question. And I mentioned a while ago there are three key issues driving my campaign. This is one. Let me first say, all due respect to Donald Trump, folks are entitled to their own opinions. They're not entitled to their own facts. Facts are facts. And if we will not accept the overwhelming consensus of the scientific community that has been studying climate change for decades, saying A, that it is real, and B, that it is anthropogenic, it is caused by human beings, if we're going to reject that, we may as well reject gravity and walk off cliffs. Because frankly, that is what we are risking. I can't guarantee what the outcomes will be, but that is what the trained scientists are saying we are risking, essentially walking off a cliff in terms of the catastrophic effects of climate change if we don't start taking serious action. So what kind of action can we take? Here in New Hampshire, we could radically transition the way we source our energy from primarily carbon-intensive sources like gas, coal, oil, to primarily renewable sources. Not overnight, not 100%, but we could move much more in that direction if we have a council and a governor and a legislature that are willing to take that bold action. To be specific, we are frankly miles behind our neighboring states in the Northeast, certainly Mass, Vermont, Maine, in our solar policy. At the end of the legislative session, we managed to double the net metering cap from 50 to 100 megawatts, but still that is not going to be enough to contain, in fact, that will constrain the growing solar industry, an industry, a homegrown industry that is just getting off its feet that we should be building up for the positive economic effects that it will have as well. I saw a statistic that we can meet 40% of our electricity needs in New Hampshire through rooftop solar. Again, not overnight, but we can be harnessing the sun to a far greater extent than we are today, and doing as our neighboring states have done, turning old dumps into solar fields. If we allow cities and towns to move forward, as some have begun to do. One thing that frustrates me deeply about my opponent is that he, again, has been a deciding vote to block these large-scale solar projects when towns have come forward with plans. When he was out of office, Peterborough here in District 5 managed to get their plan through, and they now have the largest solar array in New Hampshire, and it's a very impressive thing. We should be allowing other towns to do so as well. They're cutting out all of their municipal electricity costs as a result. That's one thing. Let me mention another thing. Last year, Kinder Morgan, one of the largest natural gas companies, pushed very hard to get a natural gas pipeline approved, the Northeast Energy Direct Pipeline that would have crossed through 17 District 5 towns right here in southern New Hampshire, risking public health, risking our environmental health in the event of natural gas spills, threatening private property through eminent domain claiming access to lands to build this pipeline, and I think critically important, we were considering with this pipeline making a multi-decade commitment to, again, fossil fuels. Not the direction we can be going as a country.
Or should be going.
Not the direction we should be going. And so I am very glad that Kinder Morgan eventually withdrew the proposal. In my last job as Executive Director of Open Democracy, we conducted studies following the money, the way that Kinder Morgan was influencing the political process. And I wrote publicly and I testified and submitted testimony to FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, to point out just how they were trying to manipulate the process and undermine the public will on this important matter. And I think that we need to be looking to the future, not stuck in the past, relying on fracked natural gas. Of course, America will continue to use it for years to come. The transition in such an important sector happens slowly, but we need to be looking forward. And there too, I would challenge my opponent. We should not be rejecting solar projects. We should be looking to other renewables and obviously to conservation, where we can start to respond as a state to this critical issue of climate change.
Is the Northern Pass still trying to be implemented?
That project continues.
Is that a pass? Has it been approved?
It has not been finally approved. It's been a 7-year effort now, and my organization also has done analysis on looking at the political influence that Northern Pass.
Why don't you tell the nice people at home about the Northern Pass, if you can?
This is a proposal to bring hydropower from Quebec, and I would point out that although there are, of course, environmental effects, negative effects of damming large rivers, it is a renewable source, and it can be and probably should be part of our energy mix for the future. But this plan would have added large-scale transmission lines, 155 feet tall, crossing through from the Canadian border through some protected national forest land, and obviously
causing a potential for many of the problems that you mentioned with the first pipeline.
Concerns around private property, naturally. Particular concerns around our tourism industry, which is so important, especially for northern New Hampshire.
Beautiful state.
I'm
Come to New Hampshire.
lucky that I got to spend my summers growing up in Lancaster, right up there in the White Mountains, where there's
Kangamangas River.
beautiful,
White Mountains.
absolutely beautiful. So I'm very concerned about that proposal. I think I'm encouraged that the company behind it, that Eversource, has proposed to bury a lot more of the line across the border in Vermont. When a similar project was brought forward a few years ago, the state immediately said, if you want to bring that electricity through our state, and it's largely to serve southern New England, you've got to bury the line. I think that's got to be the first objective here. So we do have energy needs. We can't deny that. We've had spikes in energy costs, which have been damaging to consumers and business. So we need to look for these solutions, but we need to do it in an environmentally sustainable way, in a way that's not going to wreck our tourist economy either.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to touch on one last issue. Getting back to the presidential campaign, a lot has been made of delegates. Do you think that we need drastic campaign reform in America, as nationwide, with the Electoral College, delegates, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and whatever else?
I think we need to overhaul our campaign finance system and other aspects of our electoral process, no doubt about it. A book that I wrote a couple years ago, Democracy and Poverty, outlines a bunch of these process reforms that I think are needed, and I encourage folks to check that out.
What was it?
Called Democracy and Poverty, and you can Google it, find the link online, or go to the website poorindemocracy.org. One of them, naturally, I think should be the Electoral College. I think we should also look at the delegate selection process. The will of the people needs to prevail. There shouldn't be elites getting to thwart that will. I don't think it would have made an effect in this presidential primary, but that should be the goal. That popular will is what drives it. We need to expand access to the franchise. And I think most importantly, and this doesn't get talked about enough, we need to overhaul the money in politics. I'm trying to walk that talk as a longtime campaign reformer in this campaign by capping my donations way below the legal limit, by not accepting any corporate contributions, and by raising as many small donations as possible. And we're well over 600 small donations so far.
Small donations. Taking a page out of Bernie's book.
Exactly. And we need to get the big money out. We need to overturn Citizens United. We need to move to a system of small donor-driven campaigns so that folks who don't have a ton of money can run, so that people, however much money they have, can run, but only be dependent upon the people, not big donors, corporations, or other special interests.
I like to say that corporations are made of people. They are not themselves people.
I think
Corporations are made of people. Corporations are not people.
I think you've got that right.
When Trump was still campaigning against Lil Marco and Senator Cruz, he often complained that the system is rigged and we need campaign reform, and then he beats both of them and he says, oh, you know what? Well, it's a campaign that works pretty good. So that's a statement, I suppose. Any comments on that?
You know, I think the reason Trump did well in New Hampshire, again, he didn't get more than 10% of the actual people of New Hampshire, but he did win the primary. There was one line he used over and over again, which I think really tapped into people's outrage, and I think he was right on this. He would say he can't be bought. And as a billionaire, he didn't need private donations. He didn't need big money from other people. And that is, the fact that people really resonated with that shows you that people are disgusted with the system of big money. And the only thing I would say back to Mr. Trump is, well, it's not enough to only limit, to have a system where only billionaires can't be bought. We need a system where any candidate, however much money they have, can run for public office without relying on big donations. So the system is rigged. There is way too much money in politics. It comes from a tiny slice of the electorate that does not represent the people. And I hope that I can continue promoting that cause, which has been my life's work so far.
Do you think that there's anything that the Republican leadership can do now to challenge Trump?
It's awfully hard to see how they derail his march to the nomination. I think we will see more and more Republican leaders opting out, as some have done, and I applaud them for doing so, saying this man is unacceptable, is unfit for any office.
I wish John McCain did that. He was so rude. He was beyond. As soon as he insulted John McCain's POW status, he should have been laughed out of the country. He should have moved to Mexico after he said that about John McCain, a war hero.
And I think we will see more and more Republicans recognizing that this, even if their first objective is party, they've got to take a long-term view. Donald Trump, at the head of one of the major national parties, it's a disaster for the Republican Party.
He has no tact.
And they need to recalibrate as a party. We need reasonable parties. I don't want a one-party state where one party dominates. Donald Trump, it seems, would run the Republican Party into the ground. I hope that sensible Republicans reemerge. Folks like my forebears, who used to be Republicans for many generations, when it was a very moderate, pro-growth, pro-inclusive society, pro-democracy sort of party.
Big Tent.
The party of Abraham Lincoln. I hope that party comes back.
I hope so too, because as a leftist, I don't often compliment Republicans, but I do respect many Republicans for their service and for many reasons. But Donald Trump is more of a comedian than a public servant. He so often reminds me of Jay Leno meets Andrew Dice Clay. And let me tell you something. As a president, you need to be incredibly diplomatic and incredibly tactful to create peace that America strives for. And Donald Trump may have written The Art of the Deal and how to sell somebody on something, but he has no tact, and he speaks from off the cuff. And what do you say to that?
I simply don't think he's fit to be president. And I will add that I've had the privilege of working with many Republicans over the years. People like the late Republican Senator Warren Rudman, or the late Governor Walter Peterson, who were very reasonable, very public-spirited men, really committed to public service. And I'm waiting for that party to reemerge, and I want to work with every Republican I can toward moving our state forward.
I am looking forward to the Republican Party getting its act together as well. Is there anything that little Marco and the Republican leadership can do to stop Donald Trump?
It's going to require the people making a sensible decision and voting for the public interest, not for some rather crazy gentleman who wants a lot of power.
Mr. Weeks, I want to thank you for coming on NNN.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, from all of us at NNN, we want to thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening and a pleasant tomorrow.